Ever try to start with the joke and it just wasn't funny and then you just kept trying to do it? Shouldn't do it. Anyways, Joe here. It is Monday and you know what that means. Car review day. And today, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Look at that sky. Today I've decided to do one on the 2016 Chevrolet Malibu in a beautiful, beautiful red color. Now, I wanted to do this video before. Unfortunately, we didn't have one with these options at the time. I had to wait until we got one in. And now that we have it, I'm going to do a video on it. So we will start with the exterior and we'll move around. Of course, as you guys know, starting in the previous generations, they eliminated the V6, and it really didn't matter that much because Fusion did it as well, and a couple other companies have kind of adopted that theory. However, this one has the 2-liter turbo, which is the engine to get in this car, in my opinion. So let's do a quick walk around. Okay guys, I figured we'd start with the exterior walk around. Now this is finished in a beautiful red. I love this color. Sometimes you can see like a race red or a deep pearl red. This one is more towards just like a, I'm not gonna say the old ruby red, but it's more like that. Now this one is a top of the line version of the car. It's the 2LT. You have the 19-inch wheels. You have the massive sunroof, which takes up about 3/4 of the roof on this vehicle. Coming to the front, of course, you have the now familial and familiar Chevy face. You've got HID headlights with kind of a cool feature. If you look in here on your turn signals, it's got a nice little Chevy emblem, just a fun little touch. You have down here LED running lamps, and of course a nice and pretty aggressive front splitter on this. I was actually impressed when I saw it. Again, this vehicle is riding on the optional 19-inch wheels. Beautiful design. I really do enjoy it. It looks good on almost any color, but it really pops on this red. Side repeaters in the mirrors here, as well as chrome and body color door handles. Just a nice little feature they have. The now ubiquitous shark fin, which is for your radio as well as your satellite functions. Coming around to the back, this is the easiest way to tell a turbo car from a non-turbo, and that is with the dual exhaust tips on it. This one, of course, has the 2-liter in it, as we were saying. Another way to tell a first-year car, if you see there on the back, sorry, I'll move my hand, it threw off the autofocus, is the word Premier. Having a Premier means that it's being sold pretty much at the same time as the previous generation car, which we went over a little bit when we talked about the Cruises. Massive trunk, plenty of room, and one thing that automakers are doing now that a lot of people have been demanding is lower trunk heights. As you can see, your liftover height is lower than it was on the previous car. Coming down here, pardon me, we'll kind of shade you from the sun. You just have your regular releases for the fold down rear seat. It's a 60/40 split. Should be able to get anything you want in there. There you go. Nice little shot of that. So next we will move to the engine. Okay, and here we have the 2-liter turbo Ecotec engine, and as you look at it, you can see there are a lot of similarities between this engine and the 1.4 turbo that was in the Chevy Cruze. This one has a few extra features. The turbo is larger, of course, as is the engine. Has little things like a bigger engine cover, which helps a little bit with noise reduction. Very tightly packed in there, which is very common when designing cars nowadays. They tend to tuck in as far as they can to leave as little overhang over the front wheels as possible. They could have made a lot more room in here had they brought this header panel forward more. But if they had done that, they wouldn't have been able to do this integrated front bumper as they have here. So yeah, there you go. Doesn't make quite as much power as the Ford turbo motor. However, it's also making a little bit less boost, so I'm sure it was done on purpose in an effort to make sure the engine lasts the course. About the same noise level as you would expect from any 2-liter 4-cylinder that's out there nowadays. Now, one thing I do want to point out to people, let me turn around because I'm pretty sure I'm in the sun, is when you start a vehicle like this that has variable valve timing and direct injection like that, you're going to hear noise. They're not the quietest engines in the world. It's a compromise between mechanical functionality and NVH, noise, vibration, and harshness, excuse me. So take it however you want to. I think what they did with the active noise cancellation and the thicker materials they use in the car helped quiet it down. In fact, here, let me close the hood. Bye-bye, engine. Ah, the good old hood prop. See, now that the hood's closed, you hear almost none of the mechanical noises that you were hearing before. So let's hop in the back here and we'll start there and move our way forward again. As I was saying, massive roof on this thing, so you're guaranteed to get a lot of sunlight in here if you wish it. This one is finished out in a gray leather, which is nice to have, and we will move to the front and talk about a bunch of amenities as soon as we get up there. But in the back, to keep the kids busy and keep their electronics going, of course you have your 120 volt AC adapter, you've got 2 more USB ports, and of course your power outlet, just in case you have the old school charger for things like their DS's. As you can see, my legs are just about touching, but again, I'm 6'4". I can't stress that enough. Being a taller gentleman, I tend to take up as much room as a person is going to in one of these vehicles. Same cutout that all manufacturers have started going to in order to make headroom for the rear passengers, which is a welcome thing. Back in the day when cars had sunroofs, they would start about halfway back at the roof, basically right where the sunroof hole ended, and they would drop it down and run it all the way back to the glass to give them as much room as possible for the motors. It was a lot easier to design interior panels when they were as flat as possible, and 2, because technology has come a lot farther than it used to, so motors and servos and all the gearing for the sunroofs can be smaller yet still work just as well. This one, having a dual sunroof, has a lot more glass to deal with than the old school itty bitty mailbox sunroofs that they used to have. Speaking of that, anybody remember the Piggy Bank Maximus? Okay, let's move on to the front. I don't know why that just popped into my head. So now we're here in the front seat and checking everything out. Let me turn you around. You'll see, of course, that it's going to look very familiar to the video that we did on the Cruise, and that is done on purpose, of course. It's really nonsensical to make 11 different models and have every single one be absolutely different from each other. There are exceptions to every rule, of course. The Camaro has a little bit of a heritage-inspired dashboard. The Corvette has a much more cockpit-inspired dashboard. But on your everyday cars, the Malibu, the Impala, all these things, you don't need it. So another thing I want to point out is the dashboard is not discolored. I don't know how well that's coming across. This is actually darker than this, but that's done on purpose. This is a 2-tone interior with wood grain, so that's kind of nice. Yeah, moving up here, you have your typical controls. I don't know how well they're coming off. Your home link, of course, your moonroof, sunroof, whatever you guys want to call it. I prefer to call it a sunroof. I prefer to think of a moonroof as one that doesn't open. I'm not sure if I'm 100% correct in that assumption. This one has memory seats, which is good. You can actually program each fob to have their own memory setting. Pardon me. So, you know, you have this key fob and your significant other has the other key fob, and when they use this key fob to start the vehicle, it will adjust automatically to whatever settings you have set. That's kind of a convenient thing to have. And you can also program for each vehicle how long the auto start works for each remote. So a lot of little simple things, but they're done very well. This vehicle has the same standard features, I would say, as most premium cars do nowadays. Of course, you have your navigation, your big touch screen. One thing, and I forgot to point it out, and a viewer asked a question which made me question the question and come up with the answer to said question. GM, with their current generation moving forward, is no longer putting CD players in their cars. They've decided to go to Bluetooth streaming, as well as using the USB ports and the auxiliary jacks. It does leave the traditional CD player and CD owner out to dry. However, for the larger majority of people, we're in the minority, I have CDs, but for the larger majority of buyers, they don't care about having a CD player in their car. Quick fun question for you guys. Do you know the last vehicle sold in North America that came standard with a tape deck? Here's a hint, it's newer than you might think. And for some of the millennials, it's probably older than you might think. It's okay, I'll wait a second. Did you get it yet? All right, I'll just tell you. It's the 2010 Lexus SC430. Now, when I say it came standard with a tape deck, I mean that was what came in the vehicle. Of course, you can option no radios in trucks and all that good stuff. But yeah, the last vehicle sold in North America that came standard with a tape deck was the 2010 Lexus SC430. Moving on. This one has a few more buttons than the Cruise did because it has more real estate for the buttons, which is fine by me, I don't mind. Of course, it's got dual zone climate control. One of the cool things here is when you're using the fan, kind of displays in there versus being on one of the knobs when it's not dual zone. Steering wheel controls. I've showed them before, they're pretty much the same. You have a 5-way controller which controls that screen there. However, it's saying it's on low fuel right now, so we'll just kind of exit out of that. And of course, you can display your trip, your miles per gallon, your oil level, all that stuff. And then of course you can go through and do your phone navigation, audio, and vehicle settings. For your Bluetooth and your phone, you have your voice control as well as your phone answer hang up button. On this side, you have another 5-way control. However, this controls your cruise control as well as your distance control, because this one does have adaptive cruise as well as lane keep on it. Lane keep is there. Heated steering wheel, great for the colder months, although we are now into the end of April going into May, so that's not really applying here. Automatic headlights, that's fine. Typical tack, speedo, fuel and temp gauges, nothing fancy there. This one does have a few extra features. Of course, you have traction control and park assist, but this one also has pedestrian sensors as well as cross traffic sensors. This vehicle, if it detects that you're not stopping and there's somebody in the way, will stop your vehicle for you. It's a good safety feature to have. Electronic parking brake, which everything has these days, as well as the button actuated manumatic shifter. So there you go. This vehicle is on the expensive side at $38,990. It competes absolutely directly against a fully loaded Fusion Titanium. When I talk about prices, when I'm doing this, the only price that I will talk about is the MSRP. I am not going to discuss invoice or discounts because depending on where you live, the discounts are different. The dealership that you buy your vehicle from might be different. They might have a different set of rules that they adhere to in terms of offering dealer incentives, selling a vehicle at or below invoice, if they're a Costco or a True Car participant. So there's a lot of different factors. All I want to get across is the actual price of the vehicle. Now, as you can see, had you not loaded this out with options, this vehicle would have been about $32,000, still with the 2-liter motor. Now, the driver confidence package, which gave you the adaptive cruise and the park and the braking, all that stuff, the expensive sunroof, the IntelliBeam high beam control, that's just fun stuff to have, but it was all unnecessary. You didn't have to put that on this vehicle, and it still would have been a very nicely equipped vehicle because the leather would have been standard, all that good stuff would have been standard. The only stuff that was added on were just bits and bobs that increase the inherent value of the vehicle. Down the road, it's definitely going to help the resale on this car. As a current buyer, you have to question it yourself whether you want to spend $38,995 on a Malibu, if you feel that it's worth it. And that's what the next portion will determine, and that's the drive. So let me adjust the camera and we will move on. Alright guys, here we go. We're going to do the test driving portion. Now this one is the 2-liter, as I said. It is also paired with the 8-speed automatic, which I have literally zero experience with. So we will see what it's like. This car has about 1,600 miles on it. I believe it was a demo. So I don't have to be quite as scared about, you know, giving it a little bit of oomphy to it. One thing that's noticeably missing is a shift setting for the transmission, so you can't just leave it in a sport mode and just let it do its own thing. You do have to actually maintain the shifting yourself on this vehicle. Not a detriment to the car, but it's just something I noticed, so I thought I'd point it out to you. Oh, good old turn signal, turn lane time. This one, of course, has the Bose sound system in it, which is a very good stereo system, and it sounds amazing. I'm not going to play it because I can't play copyrighted material here. So here we go. Holds gear a lot longer than I was expecting it to. I thought it would shift a lot more than that. However, I did have it at about 3/4 throttle for that. She got up and went. Don't know if that's because the engine's fully broken in yet, or if it's just because this new engine transmission combination is that decent, but we will see. Steering, of course, perfect. This one is riding on the 19-inch wheels, which, again, as we've spoken, gives you a much smaller sidewall. However, it does not give it a bad ride. It's just a little bit more communicative. I keep trying to use that word and it never comes out right. I apologize about that. Maybe you guys can maybe suggest a word other than communicative for me, because it makes me sound like I'm in the middle of a stroke. So yeah, power, even off the power band, is pretty solid. It downshifts right away, doesn't wait. By the way, on the back of the steering wheel, when you see me turn it, I haven't pointed those out. Those are the placement for the radio controls, which is something Chrysler has actually kept on the back of the wheels for quite a long time. It just took Chevy putting more stuff on the front of the steering wheel to finally do it on the back of the steering wheel. They work fine. There's nothing fancy with them, but that's why I've never really mentioned them before. Navigation is very clear, very crisp. Very easy to see, even in the off-putting light that I believe you're sitting in right now. And I do apologize for that when you have a windshield that, I mean, look at that right there. You can see my hand all the way up. It does push the windshield forward a lot, and it also brings you, the occupant, apparently forward. It doesn't really, but it makes you feel like you're further forward in the car. I don't care for that myself. I think it kind of puts me too far forward, but that's a personal preference. Of course, I've always driven sports cars and town cars and Caprices and Impalas, so I've always driven a bigger car or a pickup truck, and due to that, I'm more accustomed to sitting further back from the action. But that's, again, personal preference. I'm a little bit older, so that's what I grew up with. I'm sure that given enough time with a smaller vehicle, I'd be just fine with it, because I'm in no way uncomfortable in this car at all. Good seats, pretty supportive. You know, I'm not being thrown around at all. I've done a couple of hard turns that weren't filmed because every time I did it, that fell over. Let's see here. Just a standard little S-curve on an off-ramp. Takes it with aplomb. So, yeah. The 8-speed keeps it right where it needs to be to keep it cooking in the power band, so that's a good thing to have. Again, I don't have much experience with this 8-speed. The only 8-speed I've driven was the automatic in the Chevy Camaro, which, obviously being a rear-wheel drive car, is a completely different transmission, just happens to have the same number of gears. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go turn around, come back, and we will maybe see if there's anything else I can really tell you about this car. Alright, pardon me, my phone overheated a little bit, so I had to give it a second to cool down. One thing I also want to point out is, when I spoke with my boss about doing these videos, I told him I would be pleasant in the videos. However, I am not going to toe the party line and just say Chevy, 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 because that would just get old and then you guys wouldn't care anymore, because the reviews, I want them to be objective. This is one of the newest large mid-size sedans that I could do a review on right now. That being said, that makes it probably one of the better ones on the market today. What's coming down the pipeline? There's all kinds of stuff. I know about them. I'm sure if you read Car and Driver, you know about them as well. But as we stand today, this is an amazing car for what it is, especially if you forego a lot of the options that are on this vehicle. You can get into this vehicle for about 30 grand with that engine which is very competitive. You don't have to spend $9,000 on options for a car. However, the one thing I will suggest is definitely get this motor. I've driven the 1.5 because my parents were looking for a new car, and of course they wanted to check out the new Malibu. Completely blown away by the car. The first one they drove was an LZ, 1LZ with the 1.5 liter motor in it, and quite frankly, that's not a motor for us. And by us, I mean our roads, North American roads. The 1.5 liter engine is just like Ford's 1.5, designed to be sold in China and other countries where they tax engines over 1.6 liters. So that car is sold here as a price point leader, but it is not the vehicle that Chevy wants you to buy as a consumer, because they know just as well as anybody that's driven it knows it's not a very fast motor. It is way less power than this engine by, I think, 90 horsepower and a lot less torque. So when you give up that much power, you're definitely going to notice it, especially in a larger vehicle like this. So if you want to buy a Malibu, you definitely need to get the 2-liter turbo. Now, you can get that with cloth seats, you can get it without navigation, you can get it without the sunroof, you can get it with the standard 17-inch wheels. If you do that, you can get the car, and my parents were looking at one at about $27,000. That is a very, very strong price point to be at, because you can't get a 2-liter Fusion, even in an SE, at that price point with the standard equipment that this has. Now, you can bypass the 7-inch screen that's in the, the 8-inch screen in the Fusion and get just a standard radio setup, but this comes standard with a bigger screen, so why would you do that? Competitors, I haven't spent much time in the new Camry, and quite frankly, the Camry has moved up into the Avalon's old position. It's now almost a full-size car versus the Corolla, which has almost supplanted it. Not quite. They kept it smaller, but not by much. Let's see. The Kia, the Hyundai Sonata and the Kia Optima. Those two are very close competitors, I would say, to this vehicle in terms of equipment, price levels, things like that. If you're going to do some cross-shopping, I'm sure those are vehicles that you will consider. However, if you go with the Kia, you have to step up to the SX to get comparable performance. And again, it's going to probably push it a little bit more money than this vehicle. So use your best judgment, drive some cars. However, I will point out that the Kia Optima and the Hyundai Sonata, although they got reskinned, same basic technology that they've had since the, I believe, what is it, the 2011 redesign. So 7-year-old car versus brand new sheet from the ground up redesign. I would probably suggest you go with this one. There you go. I mean, what else do you want me to say? If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I think the next one is going to be a used car, just to see how one is held up over time. We've got a couple of fun cars sitting over at the used car department, so I will pick one of those for the next video. Now I just have to talk to the used car manager and they're not flipping out when I take the car, but you know, that's not my problem. So there you go. There's the review of the 2016 Chevy Malibu Premier Edition with the 2-liter turbo. If you'd like to subscribe, please do that. Leave me a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you feel like. Any questions, feel free to ask them. I answer every one I get. So until later.